4.
You need to put one side behind your ear, says Cindy. We get hair tips, and everything going on here. It's amazing.
There we go.
Did you hit record?
I did.
Okay, so most of you, I think, saw the message about Gene. And you know, my sense of humor has gotten me into trouble my whole life, right? You understand that. And I was joking about his message and said, Gene, if you see this, I hope you understand. We are very, very pleased. Gene sent me the message while he was still on painkillers. And that you could read it one of two ways. And one of them just upset me. He said that God had hit him out of this bout, which if you're a boxer, you don't want to be hit out of the bout. You know, I mean, that means you're down for the count. And I was beside myself. He meant to say got him out. So we're good. But I want to share something before, two people in the waiting room.
Okay. Naya, and I think that that number is Colleen, and they're
Larry.
driving.
I want to share something with you real quick before we pray. I was at a political meeting this last week, and before I went there that day, something kind of came to me. But I keep hearing people talk about, it seems like this place has gone nuts. The world, the country has just gone crazy. And people who think the opposite of me think it's gone crazy because they think I'm crazy. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter which side you're on. And there's a scripture that says, and it's in, it's 14:7, but or 7:14. Anyway, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, I will hear from heaven and I will heal their land. And it occurs to me that those of us who are believers tend to think that it's our job to convince other people who don't believe the way we do to change their behavior. And what that scripture says, I know it was talking about Israel, but we inherit a lot of that. But the idea is that if my people who are called by my name, we're afraid to be called by the name, you know, we shy away from it, will humble themselves, and we reject humbling ourselves, and pray, and I'll get back to that, and turn from their evil ways and seek my face. We go looking to change other people's behavior, seek his face, turn from our evil ways. He'll hear from heaven and heal the land. And we keep going to, I think, and I say we, I know I do, the idea that we need to make other people change their behavior. And the model, the map we get says, you need to worry about your behavior, and you need to seek God, his influence in this and in your life, instead of going out figuring out how you're going to heal the land. It says he'll heal the land. So I would say keep that in mind. And it ties into what's going on in this study. It ties into, you would ask about the shingles. I will tell you, and sorry, the voice is about gone. The week that I found out I had shingles, that sometimes these are things we learn from. It's the best case of shingles I've ever had, which is the only one. But it got, as it happens, when I got COVID and the doctor dumped me, they wouldn't treat me. I just quit going
To doctors.
And I got shingles, and then Mary ran into Mario at a party who put us to a doctor and I'm actually a whole lot better off than I was. And it wouldn't have gotten there without the shingles. So I know I talk a good game, but I believe these things. So God has a hand in the world and in our lives. And I think our job to seek him rather than just gripe that the world seems crazy is probably a wise thing to do. God, we are thankful. We're thankful for the news that we get on Gene, the people that we have with us. When we come together, we appreciate your presence with us. We recognize that the gift of each other is one of the great gifts that you give us, and we are thankful. You know, we still have concerns for those with the health. Phil and Cherie, we continue to beseech you for relief and for peace. This is a difficult time for them. And I know that Alton is still dealing with pain and the effects of the treatments that he's had, and keep your hand on them. And I know there are more, but be with us. Help us to remember those that you put in our lives, and to continue to seek you for the help and the change that we need. Amen.
Okay, we are in week 9 of Jacob. And remember, we're doing, to understand the phrase, the God of our fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham was Jacob's grandfather. Isaac was his father. And this is the story of the Bible, and the story of Jesus's line and everything, and the promises made. And Jacob, remember, had 12 sons, 1 daughter with 4 women, 2 wives and 2 concubines. His second youngest son is who we're looking at right now, and his name is Joseph. Joseph was the oldest son of his favorite wife. Rachel died at childbirth with the second son, but we are looking at Joseph. Joseph was, like I said, the oldest son of Rachel. He was his father's favorite. So his brothers were jealous of him, didn't like him. And so they sold him to a group of Ishmaelites that were heading down to Egypt. And those Ishmaelites sold Joseph to Potiphar. Potiphar was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. And then Potiphar ended up putting him in jail. When Joseph was 17 years old, this happened. We are now 17 years later, and that always intrigues me. I mean, this thing has been going on for 17 years. Now put Joseph at the age of 30, and he is out of prison. He has been taken out of prison because the cupbearer finally remembered him, and he told Pharaoh about 2 dreams he had. He interpreted them, and Pharaoh has made him his right-hand man. And as a gift to Pharaoh and make him more of an Egyptian, he has given him a wife, and he is married to the daughter of the priest of On. And we were in Walmart yesterday, and is it a Walmart brand? Everything is On. If you go to Walmart, the TVs and everything's got says, see, this is the priest of On.
I don't know if it's named after that one or not.
Anyhow, that's where we are on this crazy story. And we left off in Genesis chapter 41, and we left off at the end of verse 45. So
Before you start, so we read a lot of commentaries. We have to and watch to do this, because we like to kind of bring in a lot of different perspectives, if you will. You know, we want to know what they read in it. But there's this idea that what Joseph is about to do with his brothers, and it already began, is that he's testing them. You remember, they sell him into slavery, and they've come down for food.
no, we don't know that yet.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to get ahead just a little
Okay.
bit, because they say that, and I want you to keep this in mind. The reason I'm doing it early is I want you to keep it in mind. What they say is that Joseph is going to begin testing his brothers. I guess it's to see whether or not they're worthy of his help. I'm going to try to convince you that that's not what he's doing. That A, this is God's plan, and B, Joseph understands that this is God's hand is in this, that there is a plan. And so Joseph manipulates the circumstances, if you will. He has a plan for what's going to happen. So if it seems odd, some of the things that he does, just keep in mind that what I'm going to try and convince you of is that he knows what he's doing and there's a purpose behind it.
So now he's 30 and he has just told Pharaoh that there's going to be 7 years of abundance and then 7 years of a famine that's going to be so bad that no one's going to remember the 7 years of abundance.
Can you go back to 50?
I'm on
58.
46.
Oh, 46, okay.
Now Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph left Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout the land of Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land brought forth bountifully. During those 7 years, Joseph collected all the excess food in the land of Egypt and stored it in the cities. In every city, he laid up the food from the fields around it. So Joseph stored up grain in such abundance, like the sand of the sea, that he stopped keeping track of it, for it was beyond measure. Before the years of famine arrived, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named the firstborn Manasseh, saying, God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's household. And the second son he named Ephraim, saying, God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction.
So the idea, he's taken 20% of the grain harvest. And I mentioned to you that that's a heavy burden normally, but these years are so abundant, it would seem that the people are not too belligerent about it, because they have so much. It says that these are just tremendously abundant years, and he lays in this 20% in all the cities. I think it would be you wouldn't have enough storehouses if you tried to put it in one central place, but they've got so much, he just quits in keeping an inventory. And he has said, you need to have an overseer. Well, Pharaoh lets him do it. So this is the plan. And they're going to lay in enough grain to take care of these 7 lean years. And you want to remember that nobody is more aware of how bad it's going to get than Joseph. He knows he's got a sense of urgency, but in the process, he fathers 2 children in that 7 years with this Egyptian wife. And there are a lot of people who object to that. I don't know what to tell you. That also was part of the plan. But I want you to notice that he names the 2 sons Hebrew names. These are not Egyptian names. He remains a follower. He remains a Hebrew, and he gives them Hebrew names. And the first one, Manasseh, means either forgetfulness or forgetting. And it says, he obviously tells people, it's because I have forgotten all the bad stuff that happened in my homeland that brought me here. This is important. It's really important, because for one thing, it's a pretty good example to us. Joseph recognizes God's hand and he sees the plan in it. He's risen to a level he never could have hoped for any other way. And forgetfulness, I asked Mary this week, this came up, what's better than forgiveness? Forgetfulness, making it as if it never happened. It's one thing we tend to say to people, I forgive you, but I'm not letting go. I'm always going to remind you of it. I forgive you, but forgetfulness is different. And we're told over in the New Testament that God puts our sin as far from us as the east is from the west. It's as if it never happened. And so he names his firstborn son forgetting or forgetfulness and says, it's because I've forgotten. I have put aside all of these things that happened to me that brought me here that seemed like they were bad. That's an important piece of what's going to come. And then the second one, the name means fruitful. And he is acknowledging, he's recognizing not only the fruitfulness of having another son, but that he's become fruitful in this new land. And he names his children that. as a memorial, as an acknowledgement. Keep that in mind because it's going to become important later on in this.
And as Scott said, I mean, either you yourself or you definitely know a friend who says they've had something horrible happen in their past, someone has done them a terrible wrong, and they'll say to you, or you'll say to yourself, I have forgiven them, but you bring it up all the time. And so Scott says that's the final gift, the actual app. It should be the forgetfulness. You have really let go of it.
Scott,
Yes.
have you come across what kind of produce or whatever they were storing for up to 14 years?
Well, okay, it's interesting. Jack asked what kind of produce could they store for up to 14 years? They find grain in Egypt. It stays dry, and they find ancient grain that's, I mean, it's still in pretty good shape, and it's amazing. I think that it probably isn't wheat. It's another grain that they would have grown, and I don't know. I've heard a lot of stuff that it's spelt, that it's barley, and maybe it's a combination. But they have a lot of grains, and that certainly is the staple of life one way or the other. I don't know what else might keep for that long if they dry it, but I do know that, I mean, long before I was studying anything like this, I saw some articles, journal articles about them finding ancient grains that are still viable. So, and that's the same thing with a lot of the antiquities, a lot of the parchments, they store them in a place that's real dry. And I guess it winds up with low bacteria. I don't know, but I would say what we're looking at here is grain of some kind. Yes, sir.
So 2 questions. One, I don't know if you got this from the commentaries, say you read, so the amount of it that he was able to store up in excess of 20%, is that where you got that from, some sort of commentary?
No, it says it earlier that he was going to take 20%, which would have been a double tithe. It was, yeah,
Okay, that must have been last week.
yeah.
And then, so in verse 51, when we talk about his naming his son Manasseh, God has made me forget all my hardship. I understand that one. Then it says, in all my father's house.
Yeah.
How do you interpret that? I don't.
It is what his father's house is, the other sons. And it's what they did to him. They threw him in a hole and they were going to let him die. And then instead they sold him into slavery.
Right.
That's sort of a harsh thing for a 17-year-old boy. And there were, these other 10 sons who sort of ganged up on him. And they did something that first they would have killed him. And then they said, well, we'll sell him into slavery. And then what happens. I think what that he's saying is, all of these bad things that happened, from my family, I've let go of. I have forgotten about those. God has made me forget because he has elevated me to this place. Does that seem like a stretch to you?
To me, I appreciate your analogy in forgiveness and forgetfulness.
Yes.
But when it says, and then maybe I'm just reading something into it, but when it says, and I have forgotten my father's house, I don't know if I would tie that necessarily to the earlier comment of forgiveness and forgetfulness. But
Well, what it says, and we have to assume that this is something that he made a statement about, that he let it be known. But he says he named him Manasseh, which, if you go back and look at the Hebrew, means forgetting or forgetfulness. It's wrapped around forgetting. And he says he named him Manasseh, saying, God has made me forget all my hardship. Let's stop right there. He's made me forget all my hardship. He's had hardship. He goes in, works hard for Potiphar, and then winds up getting thrown in prison.
Because the wife wanted.
Because the wife wanted, that's right. But that's hardship, I mean, thrown in a pit to die, sold into slavery, gets in and works hard and elevates, and then gets thrown into prison for his trouble. That's hardship. And he says, if you go with the fact that he says this is forgetfulness, that is forgetting, because God has made me, this is, the way it's phrased, I think it's no accident. God has made me forget all my hardship. Now, when it says, and all my father's household, I suppose we could look, I mean, but I think in context, in the stream of thought going on here, he names his son a name that has to do with forgetting. He says, I did this because God has made me forget all these bad things that happen. And so I think it's just consistent, and it's going to tie in to some other stuff that's coming later. And this is also one of the difficulties. Sometimes because we read ahead and because we know what's about to happen, I'll throw something like this out. And Gene does this all the time. He goes, I don't see that. And then if we read down a little bit, you go, okay, wait a minute, now I see it. So I know what's coming. So I feel fairly confident in this one.
When the 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt came to an end, the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. And although there was famine in every country, there was food throughout the land of Egypt. When extreme hunger came to all the land of Egypt and the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you. When the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. And every nation came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain because the famine was severe over all the earth.
So, the lean years began and people's personal food stores, and they begin to get hungry. They begin to run low on food, and they go to Pharaoh. He's the king, he's the leader. And he says, hey, don't talk to me. Go to Joseph. He's the guy running the show here. Go see him and do whatever he tells you. He's in charge of this. And they open up the storehouses, but he's selling the grain to the Egyptians. And I know a lot of people think that seems odd. He's profiting off of this. And yes, he is. And that's sort of what kings tend to do, is profit off of things like this. And it is making Pharaoh much more wealthy, much more powerful than he was. So if you're the king and you got a guy who's putting money in your royal coffers, he seems like the guy for the job, right?
But also those 7 years of abundance, the Egyptians, even that they're starving now, they made money. And it's like you say, during the time of, in the United States, there was nothing to buy. They had something to buy. So it wasn't that they lacked money, they lacked food.
This is still a harsh thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you're profiting off of beginning to profit off of this famine. And if you read it that way, I think you're absolutely right. Now, here's an odd thing that I'll throw in, that there were times that the pharaohs were outsiders. Just like in Europe, a lot of the time the king of England was German. There's no question that one of the pharaoh lines was Greek. They were descended from one of Alexander the Great's generals. There's no question about that. But recently, Egypt kicked a Swedish archaeology group out of Egypt because they did an exhibition where they portrayed Cleopatra as being Black. There's no guarantee that this pharaoh is a native of Egypt. The fact that he's profiting off of them, and I can't say it for certain. If it seems harsh, I guess it is. That's the way the world runs. That's the world of governments. But he is selling the grain, and the people are glad to get it. They're happy to have a place to go buy the grain.
We're in chapter 42 now, and we're back to Jacob. And it's been since chapter 37 that Jacob, which we are doing the Bible study on, we have heard from him. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why are you staring at one another? Look," he added, "I have heard that there's grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die." I'm going to stop right there. Just the idea that the sons are sitting around starving in Canaan.
Word gets around of something like this, and it does, make its way up to them in Israel. Do keep in mind that even during a time of famine, there are some exceptions. But in general, the entire planet doesn't turn into a desert. The entire Middle East doesn't become sand. There's not enough to go around. It doesn't mean that they're eating their sandals necessarily, but they're beginning to feel the pinch. And you see the trend, you see that your stores are getting low. You better make a decision before you do run completely out. Yes. So they see a deep famine. People like to read these things so, exclusive, literal, that says they were just completely out of food. I'm surprised they were able to make it down to Egypt, without starving to death on the way. A famine doesn't necessarily mean that there are no crumbs left, but it is getting serious. And Jacob hears, I've heard they got grain down in Egypt. Let me give you some silver. Go down and buy some for us. We're going to need to lay in some extra.
So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he said, I'm afraid that harm might befall him. So the sons of Israel were among those who came to buy grain, since the famine had also spread to the land of Canaan. When Joseph was the ruler of the land. He was the one who sold grain to all the people. So when his brothers arrived, they bowed down before him with their faces to the ground. And when Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he treated them as strangers, and he spoke harshly to them. Where have you come from? He asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied. We are here to buy food. Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Joseph remembered his dream about them and said, you are spies. You have come to see if our land is vulnerable. No, not so, my lord, they replied. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. No, he told them, you have come to see if our land is vulnerable. But they answered, your servants are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. Then Joseph declared, just as I said, you are spies, and this is how you'll be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you shall not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be confined so that the truth of your words may be tested. If they are untrue, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies. So Joseph imprisoned them for 3 days. And on the third day, he said to them, I fear God. So do this and you will live. If you are honest, leave one of your brothers in custody while the rest of you go and take back grain to relieve the hunger of your household. Then bring your youngest brother to me so that your words can be verified, that you may not die. And to this, they consented.
Okay. So yeah, the brothers go down to buy and they bow down, they put their faces to the ground.
Just like the dream.
Just like the dream. And it says he remembers the dream where they were going to bow down to him. And this is the fruition. This is the reality of it. And he remembers and he knows that, it's true. The fact that he recognized them and they don't recognize him is not as strange as it might sound. For starters, it's not hard to place them as Hebrews just because of the way they speak. But remember, the idea when I've brought out several times about to lift up someone's head, when you come in and you're trying to get grain to live and they've got their heads down, they probably are not staring him in the face. But the other thing is they assume that their brother is dead or being a slave someplace. They're not looking for him. And I don't know if you have ever seen someone out of context. You see them in a place that you don't expect them to see them. But it's hard to,
It's been 20 years. It's 17 and now he is 37. And his brothers have beards and probably, because that was the Hebrew way. And when we were told that when Joseph was taken out of prison, the first thing they did was shave him and put different clothes on him. So he does not look like Yeah.
But the last thing you expect is your brother who you sold into slavery to be the one who's in charge of all of Egypt. I'm sorry. I don't know. It is uncanny. He looks kind of familiar, but that's not Joseph. So it's really not that strange. But he recognizes them and he begins to mess with them. He says, you know, where are you from? Well, we're from is, you know, this Canaan area. And we are 12 brothers. And I know people who read that. I've seen these people and they make a big deal out of it because he's one of the 12. But they don't read the next verses that say, you know, we're 12 brothers. One of them is dead, and the other one is the youngest, and he's at home with dad. Remember that Jacob renames Benjamin. His mom, just before she died, Rachel, called him son of sorrow or son of my sorrow. And Jacob renames him son of my strength or son of my right hand. He's literally, you know, this is the baby of the family. And he's everything to Jacob. So they tell him that one of them's at home with dad. The other one's dead. But we're not spies. He says, you guys are spies. You've heard we have a lot of stuff. You've come here to see if you can invade. And they're going, no, I mean, no, we just want to buy some grain. He throws them in jail and for 3 days. And he says, here's the plan. You're going to leave one of your number here. You're going to leave one of your brothers here with me as a surety, which is something that gets done a lot, especially back in that time. You might take if you take over a country, you might take the king's son and raise him in your house, but it's a message. If you mess with me, I'll kill him. He's the heir and I'll kill him. So I'm taking one of your brothers. You're going to go back home and you're going to get this other brother and prove to me that you didn't just lie to me. And you're going to bring him back here. And if you have the guts to do that, I'll believe you. And if you don't come back, the brother stays with me. So he begins hatching this plan. And he knows exactly what he's going to do. I'm convinced he knows exactly what needs to happen. And it's going to come out. But anyway, the idea is he wants to bring them all down to Egypt. And this is God's plan for them as well. But I'm going to bring them all down here. And Jacob at this point is how old? 130?
I think 150.
Anyway, he's old. There's no likely way that he's going to choose to make a trip down to Egypt. And he's not going to let Benjamin go. And what Jacob understands, Joseph understands already, is they need to come down. This famine, see, he knows how bad it's going to get. He understands the dream. He was given the interpretation of the dream that these 7 lean years are going to be worse than anything you've ever seen. And it's very important to him. They're going to need to come here. And the fact he's the next thing to the king. He is, for all purposes, you know, the ruler. What a great place to keep your family safe, right there with you. This is what I'm going to try and convince you of. This is the plan, and it begins right here. So you go home, get the younger brother, bring him back, and prove to me that you're who you say, that you're not spies.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
So earlier on, one of the verses said that Jacob decided to keep the youngest son home. Thinking, last time we sent the youngest son with his brothers was the time that they did with Joseph what they did.
Yes.
Because he was also the other only son that he had from his favorite wife.
Yes.
Yes.
So he didn't want to take a chance of losing him too.
He does not want to lose Benjamin. I already lost Joseph. He was my favorite, but I'm not losing Benjamin. And it is the son of Rachel, the favorite wife. And I still think that's a sick thing. I mean, I do. I think that's a sick thing. We see in the law where it says, don't provoke your children to wrath. Yeah, honor your father and the mother, but parents, don't provoke your children to wrath. Well, I think this was an example of how you do that. Having one that is so clearly a favorite that you make him a royal looking cloak and tell the other ones to go out and tend the animals, that was not a good thing. But there's no question, Benjamin is the other son of Rachel. He is not going to take a chance on losing him. That's exactly what's going on. Joseph knows that. Joseph understands what that means to him, and he wants to get them down. Keep that in mind. This is a plan.
Then they said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw his anguish when he pleaded with us, but we would not listen. That is why this distress has come upon us. And Reuben responded, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you would not listen. Now we must account for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph understood them, since there was an interpreter between them. And he turned away from them and wept. When he turned back and spoke to them, he took Simeon from them and had him bound before their eyes.
So this, and once again, it's absolutely plausible, and it makes perfect sense. They're speaking in Hebrew. And this thing where he's told them, you're spies, I'm keeping one of your brothers, all this stuff. And they're down there arguing amongst themselves. You know, this is punishment. This is payback for what we did to Joseph. And they don't understand. Joseph can understand what they're saying. They think, and my gosh, do you see this where people talk in some other language and think you don't understand?
When we lived in Israel and we were working for my ex-father-in-law's company, we'd come Sunday night, Sunday afternoon was the weekly meeting we had to be back for. And we would meet with management from this company, and the language of business was still English. And they would speak English at this meeting that we were part of until they didn't want us to understand something. And then they would switch to Hebrew. And Scott knew, I mean, I didn't speak any Hebrew, and Scott understood more than, first of all, they knew, but he didn't understand everything, but he would.
I learned enough, and I'll another time, but I had to do the same thing when I was younger, and they put me in charge of a warehouse where I was supervising grown men. I had to learn enough Spanish that one day I started kind of participating, and you could see them freeze. They just locked up. It's like, oh my gosh, how much does he know? How much has he been hearing? And it was the same thing in Israel. They didn't want us. So I learned enough Hebrew that I could chuckle at times, or I could, throw something in, and it stopped that nonsense. They quit doing it. They talk privately. But the point is, Joseph knows Hebrew. And they're down there arguing with each other, and they go, this is it. This is punishment for what we did to our brother. And here's Reuben. You remember Reuben didn't want him to kill him. And he said, you can throw him down in the hole. But his plan was to go back and get Joseph and take him home to dad. And he went away to tend animals, and he comes back and Joseph is gone. And so he's saying, I told you so. Yeah, this is punishment for what we did. And I told you guys not to do. Didn't I tell you guys not to do that? And now we're all in trouble because of it. This works for me. I mean, this makes sense. And he takes the brother Simeon and says, this is the one I'm holding. The rest of you scoot on back up where you came from, and don't come back without your young brother.
Then Joseph gave orders. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. We're on Genesis 42, verse 25. 25. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to return each man's silver to his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. This order was carried out, and they loaded the grain on their donkeys and departed. At the place where they lodged for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey, and he saw his silver in the mouth of the sack. My silver has been returned, he said to the brothers. It is here in my sack. Their hearts sank, and trembling, they turned to one another and said, what is this that God has done to us? When they reached their father, Jacob, in the land of Canaan, they described to him all that had happened to them. The man who is Lord of the land spoke harshly to us and accused us of spying on the country. But we told him, we are honest men, not spies. We are 12 brothers, son of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in the land of Canaan. Then the man who is Lord of the land said to us, This is how I will know whether you're honest. Leave one brother with me, take food to relieve the hunger of your household, and go. But bring your youngest brother back to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land. As they began emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his bag of silver. And when they and their father saw the bags of silver, they were dismayed. Their father Jacob said to them, "You have deprived me of my sons. Joseph is gone, and Simeon is no more. Now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is going against me."
Let's stop there. So we're told, and I don't know why people overlook that, Joseph told the steward, give them their grain, and then take the money that they paid, the silver, and stick it in the bag with it. And say, no, so this is his instruction. This is a plan. And they do it, and they get a little bit of a journey away, and one of them opens his bag, and there's his money in there. Remember, they've been accused of being spies. And now they think what it's going to look like is we stole our money back. We got our grain, and we stole the money that we paid them and carried it off with us. That's not going to go well. I mean, they recognize this is trouble for them. And they again say, what is this thing God has done to us? They've become convinced that this is payback, punishment for what they did to Joseph. And they go and tell Jacob this, and that they left one of their brothers. And Jacob loves his children. And he says, he doesn't say you boneheads, but you already deprived me of one son. Joseph is dead. And now Simeon is no more. Because when Jacob hears the whole story, he knows what's going to happen. They're going to discover that the silver is light and figure out they did it. They're just going to kill him. Jacob is convinced they will kill Simeon over this. And he says, and now you want me to send another one of my sons down there? The idea being that if I don't send Benjamin, they're going to kill Simeon. And you want me, he says, I'm not trading, I'm not going to lose two of them. So he's counting Simeon as already dead.
Then Reuben said to his father, "You may kill my two sons if I fail to bring him back to you, but put him in my care and I will return him." But Jacob replied, "My son will not go down there with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. If harm comes to him on your journey, you will bring my gray hair down to Sheol in sorrow."
I thought this was an interesting comment. He says, look, Dad, I've got two sons. I'm putting everything on the line. I'm telling you, I will come back with Benjamin. It's the only way we can get Simeon. Let me take him and I'll vouch for his safety. And Jacob, there's no way I'm sending Benjamin down there. But this comment just really gets to me. He says, my son will not go down there with you, for his brother is dead and he alone is left. Remember, there are 10 other brothers and he alone is left. And this is one of those things that will, you talk about playing favorites. He's saying, I really had two sons that really counted and only one of them is left and I'm not sending him to Egypt. It's a little sick. And then he says, everything is turning against me. We teach, I don't like to do sermons, okay, but sometimes there has to be a lesson for us. Jacob is convinced everything is turning against him. Everything is bad. We all get there sometime or another. I mean, just the whole world is conspiring against me. And what's really happening is this is potentially the only way for them to be delivered from what's to come. The world is not only not turning against him, but God has worked this to his favor in a way that is unbelievable. He doesn't know how good things are turning for him. Something to keep in mind. You can draw your own conclusions.
And a couple of things to remember. Jacob knows that Joseph was the youngest. He had gone out to see his brothers. He does not know, there's nothing that says in the Bible that he knows what his brothers really did. His brothers have not, his sons have not shared what they did to Joseph. So they just remembered they gave him the bloody coat and they believed that he was just eaten by animals.
And go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go
No,
ahead.
this is why I started out telling you about my shingles, okay? Because I did a bonehead thing, just getting disgusted and not going back to the doctor. I did a dumb thing. And we went to get shingle shots. We made appointments to get shingle shots. And we get there and they go, we don't have any appointment for you. What we did at least a couple of times.
Yeah.
And we finally said, to heck with it. I'm not doing it. And I get shingles, right? I don't know what else might have convinced me to go back to the doctors, okay? Shingles was on the list. It could have been worse. It was only shingles, but that brought me back and it has made already, it's made a big difference. But these are the things. And I told you when I got shingles, I told you that Sunday, if you go back and look, that sometimes these are things we learn from, that the world had not conspired against me because I got shingles. And in retrospect, it's the best thing that could have happened. So yeah, do I believe this? I believe this. And I believe that Jacob has not stayed with his faith in Yahweh to understand that this may not be as bad as it looks.
Genesis chapter 43. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when Jacob's son had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, go back and buy us a little more food. But Judah replied, the man solemnly warned us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send your brother with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man told us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. Why did you bring this trouble upon me? Israel asked. Why did you tell the man you had another brother?
Can we stop there
Yeah.
real quick? Because you notice it refers to him as Israel here, and it switches back and forth from Jacob to Israel from time to time. Remember, Israel means contends with God or contended with God. It's no accident that they switched from Jacob to Israel.
'Cause he's
He is
contending with God.
contending with God right here. And they began to run out of food. The grain that they bought is getting low. And so Jacob says, go back and buy some more grain. He's trying to ignore the fact he knows that's not going to happen. But he says, you guys go down and buy more grain. And they're going, look, there's no way we're walking back in the lion's den. The guy called us spies. And he says, if we don't come back with proof of our story, it's going to confirm that we're spies. Spies get killed. There's no way we're doing that. At the very best, they might become slaves. And Jacob says, don't stop whining, just go do the thing. And he says, no, he told us, you won't see my face again. Remember, Joseph is the one in charge of doling out the grain. And he says, I'm not even going to let you, you're not going to get another audience with me unless you bring proof of your story. And what does Jacob say? Why have you brought this trouble on me? He sees there's no way around this. They can't get by without buying grain, and he can't buy grain without sending Benjamin, and he's not sending Benjamin. You've put me in one of these dilemmas. Why have you done this to me? And what was the last part there?
Why did you, I just stopped with, why did you tell the man you had another brother?
Why did you tell him you had another brother? It's still your fault. You should have kept your mouth shut. You get pulled over on a traffic stop. Don't tell them anything that you don't have to, right? Invoke the fifth. Don't chat too much. And so he's still blaming them. If you hadn't told him you had a brother, we wouldn't be in this mess. What were you thinking? Does this sound like human beings to you? Does this sound like things that we do? Sure.
This reminds me also the importance of studying this as a whole, because if you just picked up the Bible and decided to read this chapter, you miss the idea of that Jacob and Israel are the same person. And there's a time when the Bible says Israel, when Jacob, who has been renamed in Israel, is contending with God. You would miss that. or I would miss that. They replied, the man questioned us in detail about ourselves and our family. Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother? And we answered him accordingly. How could we possibly know what he would say? Bring your brother here? And Judah said to his father Israel, send the boy with me, and we will go down at once, so that we may live and not die. Neither we nor you nor our children. I will guarantee his safety. You may hold me personally responsible. If I do not bring him back and set him before you, then may I bear the guilt before you all my life. If we had not delayed, we could have come and gone twice by now. Then their father Israel said to them, if it must be so, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your packs and carry them down as a gift for the man. A little balm, a little honey, spices and myrrh, pistachios and almonds. Take double the silver with you, so that you may return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother as well and return to the man at once. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, that he may release your other brother along with Benjamin. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved. So the men took these gifts along with double the amount of silver and Benjamin as well. Then they hurried down to Egypt and stood before Joseph.
So there's another answer to one of those questions. Oh, Jack is gone, but he had asked what kind of food is this? You notice they had pistachios and almonds and honey. It's not like the place became a sanded over desert. There's just not enough food. It's not going to support them. And what happens here is that they begin to see the grain stores dwindling, and they realize we got to deal with reality. And Jacob is looking for any way out of this, and there's no way out. And that's by design. And he starts saying, we got to do something. And Judah says, look, I'll guarantee the boy's safety. It's on me. Now, there's no way he can do that. I mean, you know that, right? If Pharaoh decides he's going to take the boy or kill him, nobody can stop that. It's kind of an empty promise, but he's saying, whatever happens to Benjamin happens to me. That's about as good of a guarantee as you can get. And he said, look, obviously this has been going on for some time, because he says, if we hadn't delayed, we could have gone there and back twice. We got to do something. And Jacob has no choice but accept the reality. He goes, all right, fine. Go back down, take your brother, and may God have mercy and send back both Simeon and Benjamin over this. But as for me, if I'm bereaved, in other words, if I lose two more sons, I guess that's how it has to be. So he is literally backed into a corner. I say we a lot, I can speak for me. There have been times I've had to be backed into a corner to do what I knew I had to do. And you look for a way out, and sometimes there just is no other way. And you have to be forced to that. That's what's happened here. So he says, but take these gifts, honey, a little balm, the best we have as a gift for this man, to try and pacify him, to put him in a good mood so that he won't kill you and your brothers.
He did this before, didn't he?
What's that?
Give gifts. He was Jacob is the one that gave gifts to Esau, so Esau wouldn't be.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, he did try this that's a good point. When he was going back home to meet Esau, he sends all these gifts out in front to soften him up. And you're right. That's what he's doing here. But anyway,
Sometimes I come up with a good idea.
People I do too much talking, but this is how we work. But no, you're right. That's exactly what he's doing. And in fact, we're going to see another real big similarity in the next lesson.
But we're done right now.
Are we done?
Yes, we can't go on any further. It is 9:56.
Okay, well, so Mary could just about quote this, but every now and then I'll say it and I'll tell you it's maybe the most true thing I'll ever tell you. I am convinced the biggest train wrecks in my life, and looking back, there have been some train wrecks, have turned out in retrospect to be the exact amount of force that it took to push me from where I was to where I needed to be. And any less, and I wouldn't listen, any more would have been cruel. And so what you see here is the exact amount of force. What needs to happen is that Jacob and his entire household need to leave the land that they're in and go down to Egypt. Now, put yourself in Jacob's place. He was sent, he went back to Haran, and God told him, I'll be with you the whole time you're gone, and I'll bring you back. This is your land. I'm giving it to you. This is your inheritance. And and he was as good as his word. So now put yourself in Jacob's shoes. If someone suggests to you, you should abandon this land and run off somewhere else, would you resist? Of course, Jacob would resist. Jacob has no intention, and especially as old as he is, of leaving this land. This is his. This is their birthright, their inheritance. And yet what has to happen, and it goes all the way down through Moses, we see what's happening right here just expand and multiply until we hit Moses in the Exodus. This is a plan. It has to happen. And this is the exact amount of force that it took to get them and to get Jacob to do what needed to be done for the plan. Anything else?
Nope.
All right. And we have such short vision, such short memories. We wouldn't understand the whole plan if we knew it a lot of the time, and things come together in ways so uncanny that we would never dare ask for something like that to happen. And the thing I ask for is the faith, the understanding to recognize that there is a plan, that you actually do care about us, and to seek your face, to seek you, and to humble ourselves and turn from our ways that separate us from you. That reminder, my prayer is that you let us carry that with us as we look around at a world that doesn't make sense, to recognize that you do have a plan and your hand is here. And that what we need to focus on is doing those things that we need to do. We're grateful once again for those that you've brought back to us, for your hand on Gene, and we continue to pray for these others, but be with us always this week as we get the opportunities to live out some of these things that we learn in your word. Amen.
Yeah. You guys can unmute yourselves. Good morning, you guys. You guys have a good week. Where did you say you are, Julie?
We are in Chicago. We're just leaving Chicago. We've been visiting the grandbaby.
Oh, was it fun?
So, oh, we had so much fun. It just goes so fast. So we had a great time. But I'm getting ready to have my right knee replaced on Thursday. So we wanted to make sure we got
We should have done that. So is it outpatient or do you stay overnight?
Outpatient. The doctor said I go in Thursday. My surgery starts at 8. He said he'll be done by 8:40.
There we go. Well, I hope you can be on next Sunday to see how you are, but we will keep you in your prayers, and I will touch base with you on Friday or with Bob to see how surgery goes. Tell him to give me.
Sounds great.
Tell me to
Sounds-
give you a heads up.
You bet. Great to see you guys, and thanks for
Great to see you.
doing Bible study.
Have fun, Diane, with V tomorrow. Say hello.
I sure will. I can't wait to meet her in person. And I also wanted to ask you for travel. So next weekend I won't be on. I'm actually meeting Scott in Mississippi. And he's driving Avery and Colin to us. And then we're going to have them for a week here in North Carolina.
Oh,
We're
enjoy.
driving Saturday and Sunday, and then we'll have them for the week. And then we're actually, after the following weekend, I think on Monday, that following Monday, we're driving them home all the way to Rockport, spending a day and then driving home. So
There you go. Okay, well, you have a good one. Sounds
thank you,
good.
Mercies.
Have a
Thank
great
you, guys.
week.
Bye.
Good luck with your surgery.